Hi, I'm Dee Gardner, psychotherapist with Gardner Counseling Services. Today, I'm going to talk about EMDR, which stands for Eye Movement Desensitization Reprocessing. So let's discuss it. Okay, EMDR, as I mentioned, stands for Eye Movement Desensitization Reprocessing. That is a technique, that is a treatment method that was designed by a female named Francine Shapiro. Francine stumbled on it accidentally. She noticed that she would have these disturbing thoughts. She'd have these disturbing memories. That meant she'd feel a certain kind of way. She'd be upset, frustrated, stressed, whatever it is. And then she noticed it would just suddenly start going away. And then she started monitoring what was going on, and she noticed her eyes would flutter in certain directions. And then the emotions would calm down. And then when she thought about that experience again, she didn't feel it anymore. It didn't have the intensity that it once had before. It didn't bother her even. She noticed what was happening, and her eyes were moving in a certain way. And so then she started trying this on friends. She would have them move their eyes a certain way whenever they were recalling some sort of difficult or even traumatic experiences. And then later when they think about it, it didn't bother them anymore. So that was the birth of EMDR. So you'll hear me refer to it, and that's what it's known for, is EMDR. So I want to touch base on the efficacy of it, and what that means is, does it work? Does it work? So the number one endorsement for EMDR is the Department of Defense. They found that EMDR is known to help with flashbacks from veterans that's been on combat. So the veterans would come back, and they would come back from wars, and they do EMDR. They participate in EMDR with the trained EMDR psychotherapist, and then they wouldn't have the flashbacks anymore, or the nightmares, or hearing the explosions, or those PTSD symptoms, the post-traumatic stress syndrome symptoms. They wouldn't have those anymore. And it used to be called shell shock, when the siren would make them, or loud noise. And so I have a list of studies here. I'm going to read a few of them, because if you check the internet, you'll find a whole lot more positive reactions toward it than negative. It's very, very effective, and there's a ton of research. Here's one. Combat veterans from Desert Storm, the Vietnam War, the Korean War, World War II, who were formerly treatment resistant and have showed marked improvement in symptoms such as flashbacks, nightmares, and other PTSD symptoms. So it's known to help them. Here's another one. Persons with phobias and panic disorder who revealed a rapid, turn the page here. I'm reading her book, Francis Shapiro's book, and a link and all these research studies will be in the description below here if you're looking at this on YouTube. A reduction of fear and symptoms. Crime victims and police officers who are no longer disturbed by the after effects of violent assaults. People relieved of excessive grief due to the loss of a loved one or a line of duty debt, such as engineers no longer devastated with guilt because their trains unavoidably killed pedestrians. Children healed of symptoms caused by the trauma of assault or natural disaster. Sexual assault victims who are free of debilitating symptoms, enabling them to lead normal lives and have intimate relationships. Accident, surgery, and burn victims who were once emotionally or physically debilitated and who are now able to resume productive lives. Victims of sexual dysfunction who are now able to maintain healthy sexual relationships. I'm a certified sex addiction therapist, and EMDR has been known to help with those symptoms as well. Clients at all ages of chemical dependency and pathological gamblers who now show stable recovery and a decreased tendency to relapse. People with dissociative disorders who progress at a rate more rapid than that achieved by traditional treatment. People with performance anxiety and those seeking performance enhancement in business, performing arts, school, and sports activities have benefited from EMDR. People suffering from somatoform disorders such as body dysmorphic disorder or chronic pain who have rapidly recovered. Clients with diagnosed personality disorders or complex PTSD who show increased stabilization and functioning. I'm going to do a separate video on complex PTSD. That's where a person has post-traumatic stress syndrome, and it's due to many experiences, not just one or two. And here's one last one listed in Francine Shapiro's book. Clients with a wide variety of PTSD and other diagnoses who have experienced substantial benefit from EMDR. So that's just a small list of 14. Did I cover you? Did I cover your issue or someone that you know, a loved one's issue, by reading that? So I'll tell you a little bit more about what it is, because some people think it's very mystical. We don't know exactly why it works, but we do know it works. And one of the most important things is that if you go to a therapist, you want it to work. You want results. You have your goals. That's the beauty. I don't know what I would do in my practice had it not been for EMDR. Sometimes a person's been seeing a therapist for years, for many years, and they go through talk therapy. Well, talk therapy works here, the frontal cortex. Talk therapy is you're using your logic, you're thinking rational, which is lots of research have shown that is very effective. However, unlike talk therapy works on the frontal cortex. It works on the frontal cortex. This is the thinking, the logical, the rational part of the brain. You have to be alert, you have to be logical, you have to recall memories and talk about them. So a person might write, draw, or just talk about a certain traumatic experience or a very difficult experience or a disturbing experience. EMDR focuses not as much on that on storytelling, so to speak, as it does the unconscious. The part of the brain that sets you off, that's what we mean by unconscious. The survival center, there's something in your brain that says danger. When you sense danger, the heart races, the temperature goes up, the body gets ready for fight, it gets ready to protect itself, defend itself, run, you even get stronger. Your breathing becomes shallow, and we get prepared. Or the body might freeze. It just depends on the person. Whenever you feel threatened or afraid or angry, it may freeze. Or it may shut down. We call that freeze. The body, fight, flight, or freeze. We may run. You may just automatically run. We need to take off because somebody's following us or we're afraid and we want to run. So those are three different things that the brain might set off whenever it's in danger. Well, what happens is that process gets impacted by trauma, by addiction, maybe even by abuse. So if a person is living day in and day out in a traumatic experience, or a person experiences something all of a sudden like an auto accident, an explosion, physical violence, an attack, fell off of something and broke something, fell off of a building or fell off of a mountain, or something happened all of a sudden. I mentioned auto accident, plane accident, near auto accident, and you get the message. So when a person experiences all of that, the brain automatically, whether you want to or not, the brain, that's why we call it unconscious. It's not voluntarily. It says danger. Even if it was a split second, an entire process took off and got set off into the body from the part of the brain, we call it amygdala. the part of the brain that's responsible for survival sets off everything and all these systems in the body that says you're in danger and we need to do something. Well, what happens once the danger is over, the body is supposed to calm down. If it doesn't get to do that, if it doesn't get to go through the entire process, and again, I'll talk about that some more in another video. If it doesn't get to do that, maybe the person didn't have anybody to talk to. Maybe the person just decided to try to forget it and act like it didn't happen. Maybe the person avoid feelings related to that particular experience. Whatever it is, it gets stuck somewhere in the body. It could be from your head to your toe, that experience. And every time something happens that's very similar, that button gets pressed. It's like a button that gets pressed over and over and over again. And the person may not be aware, the traumatized person may not be aware that that's what's happening. All they know is they don't like funerals. All they know is they don't like hospitals. When there may have been some grief that they never processed, someone may have died traumatically and they never processed. All they know is they don't like to go to that area of town or take that exit or go into that house, that type of thing. So according to we call it an AIP model, adaptive information processing is what we call it in the EMDR world. Person sees that trigger, let's say a particular house where something bad happened, or a car, getting into the car, they remember that accident. The brain processes in their brain, in their body, the exact same way that it did whenever that experience took place. So what happens is, a person sitting right there in their driveway, or even just thinking about driving, the amygdala, that brain, will say danger. It doesn't know that it's not happening right now. It doesn't know that that was in the past, that was 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 1 year ago. It thinks it's happening right now. If the process that it needed to take at that time didn't happen. I always call it up and out. If the trauma, the experience, the emotions behind it did not get to come up and out of your system, it gets stuck, just waiting for that button to be pushed over and over again. A person might end up on drugs. A person might end up some sort of addiction, sex addiction, love addiction, alcohol addiction, drug addiction, work addiction, exercise addiction, eating disorders. All these addictions and eating disorders and sex drive, all of that resides in the same area that sets off trauma. Our desire for food, our desire for sex, that's for procreation. All these are survival mechanisms in the brain and in the body, and they get set off. Those are just a few examples. During the process of EMDR, a person may or may not remember. There's a protocol when you don't remember whatever happened as well. So a person might remember bits and pieces, or they might just think about it. And the person thinks about how, they just think about the experience. They talk a little bit of, they don't have to talk about it. They just state maybe one or two words about how they feel. They state about what they are believing and what's going on at the moment. And then we just do our movement. And then the person just goes with whatever it is that comes up. It's a very, very simple client-driven process. The therapist doesn't push, especially when it comes to trauma treatments. We don't push. We don't push anyone along. When you don't bring up anything or talk about anything, you're not ready. Sometimes a person doesn't want to talk about some things that happened in the past. They just want to talk about that person that got on their nerves last week. We might do that. They know something is setting them off at work or something is setting them off at home, but they don't want to go into a whole lot of details. With the EMDR, you don't have to. So a person may have done talk therapy for years over some situations or some painful experiences or disturbances or frustrations. And they can come into a few EMDR sessions over one experience and get it resolved. And then when they think about it, it's neutral, no emotional reaction at all. It's almost as if it never happened and the person's wondering, why was that so hard for me? What's so interesting is sometimes a person doesn't even remember that they came for a particular type of EMDR a particular problem, they don't even remember the problem. So it can take anywhere from 1 session to get some relief to 12 sessions, or maybe a few more if we're working on one incident. If a person has complex PTSD, or they have some other things that come up, for example, if there was some abuse or some sort of neglect or other traumas may come up in the process, then it may take longer. It's very unique, it's very individualized. Some people think that they're ready to visit some things and resolve some traumas, and they're not, because their system isn't ready. So it's a biological process, it's a biological mechanism, and it's an unconscious mechanism, and the client is always in control. So there's hope. There are other things that a person can do for therapy and to heal from painful disturbances or painful emotions or memories or nightmares or phobias or panic attacks or severe anxiety or PTSD. There's more. There are other things that can be done. So my practice, I use a comprehensive approach. I use talk therapy. I use mindfulness. I use CBT. That means cognitive behavioral therapy. That's what we're used to. Your thoughts, your feelings, your emotions. We use monitoring that and changing that. I use all types of strategies. Non-traditional. I use many models. It's just depending on what the person needs. So if you all have been seeing a therapist, or if you have some traumatic experiences and you want to get some help with it, and you don't want to spend years working through an issue, feel free to contact an EMDR therapist. Everybody that says they're an EMDR therapist is not properly trained. There is extensive consultation, there are different training levels, and there's lots of experience that we need to go through. So you want to be sure you have an EMDR trained therapist or an EMDR certified therapist. Closing, I am Dee Gardner, Gardner Counseling Services. And remember, change is always greener on the other side. Remember, subscribe to my channel if you haven't done so, and you can stay current on my videos. I'll be producing these on a regular basis. Thumbs up to this video if you like it. Thumbs up to this video if you didn't like it. And also comment. I want to hear your comments. Good, bad, or ugly. I want to hear your comments. I read every comment and I will respond.